And then I saw something on TV about Mount Everest. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to climb that mountain. And the craziest thing is that was out of sight, out of mind for many, many years. I'm sitting on my couch in Denver, Colorado, watching random daytime television, absolutely nothing to do with mountaineering. I wasn't into hiking. I wasn't into mountaineering. I played traditional sports. I was a college athlete. A long time has passed, 15 or more years has passed, and never thought about it since. And then for some dumb reason, watching whatever mindless television, Days or Lives or whatever it might have been, that recollection of my head popped back in and said, you know what, Alex, you promised yourself that one day you would climb Everest. And right then and there, I said to myself, you know what, if I can't keep a commitment to myself, how can I honor my commitments to anyone else? And the next day I started.
That is Alex Harz, today's guest, expressing one of the core themes of today's show, which is to take the promises you make to yourself seriously, to take your dreams seriously, no matter how outlandish they may seem to you or anyone else, and despite the challenges, or maybe because of them. Today, Alex shares his journey of embracing his childhood dream to climb Mount Everest after it resurfaced, which meant facing the physical and emotional challenges of climbing Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world, of course, the financial challenges of making it happen, and the logistical challenges of making a documentary film about the experience. And no attempt to summit the tallest mountain in the world is without its potential life-ending and life-altering moments such as this.
But then I saw this strange rock, and I'm like, that's an interesting looking rock. And then as more of that orange light came onto it, I was like, ooh, that's not a rock at all. And then I got to see, okay, that's a dead body, and it's about 10, 15 feet in front of me.
You'll hear all the stories behind Alex's attempt up Mount Everest as a climber, his experience making a film about it. He also shares his thoughts on the ethics and challenges of Everest tourism, advice for climbing your own Mount Everest, aka achieving your own big goals, and loads more. Plus, you're going to hear part 4 of our special mini-series showcasing the top 5 road trips in the USA. It's all happening in this episode right now, so buckle up, strap in, get your mountain climbing harness on. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. Before diving in, I should let you know I watched Alex's film, The Quest Everest. I thought it was fantastic, and as you'll hear in the beginning of this interview, he got the ultimate compliment for his film from my household, at least when it comes to films here in this house. Now, I do encourage you to go to thequesteverest.com. You can catch the trailer over there and you can learn more about it. Also, don't forget we have a free newsletter that goes out to the listening community over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. If you haven't signed up for that, go ahead and do so. And also, part 4 of that road trip series starts with a question that will leave you guessing about where we are going today. Be on the lookout for that. That will come after the interview, and I'll also leave you with some thoughts on our conversation, as well as a quote that couldn't tie this one up any better. So let's slip and slide into this conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers.
Liebe Fahrgäste, ab dem 7. Januar gilt der Rheintakt. Damit optimieren wir viele Linienwege und Fahrzeiten. Bitte informieren Sie
Alex Harz, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. Good to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jason.
Now, what's harder, man, trying to summit Mount Everest or staying up until 1 a.m. to record on some dude's travel podcast?
Well, it really depends. It depends on your adrenaline at the moment. So, right now I'm hanging in there, a little bit of coffee, a dash of Red Bull, and I'm there.
Yeah, okay. That's the key mixture, huh? No, I appreciate it, man. You're in Denver right now, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Denver, Colorado. Yep.
You grew up in Nebraska, though?
It's funny. I was born in Spain. I grew up early part of my life in Germany, actually. But when we came to the United States, we moved to Nebraska because my mom's side of the family, who's the American side of me, she was from the Midwest. And so when we came to the United States, it made a lot of sense to go there where there was some family familiarity.
What age were you brought back to the States?
Around 6 is when I was brought
Interesting.
back. And then the thing is, I'd spent all my summers or many of my summers back in Europe. So, our 1.5, 2 months summer off that we get here as American kids, my parents would stick me on a plane and send me back to Germany and hang out with my German side of the family there. And, so that really kind of got me the cultural bug going at a young age.
Okay. Interesting. So your dad's German, mom American.
Correct.
Yeah, I have to ask you this because my kids are half American, half Norwegian. I'm just curious what, being somebody who was raised in a half American, half German, in this case, family, what was that experience like for you with the mix of cultures?
Yeah, it's pretty good because when I speak English, for example, I don't have a German accent and vice versa because early on I was, taught German and English simultaneously. So, that was kind of neat. And also, of course, going back and forth, especially during the summer times, going back and forth between two completely different cultures, where I'd be speaking English, American school kids, doing the American lifestyle. And then for 2 months every summer, I'd right away immerse myself into what German kids are doing, and speaking German the whole time and so on. So it was really interesting. And looking back at it now at an older age, I greatly appreciate that because that got me the curiosity to want to explore. It got me the curiosity to want to travel. It got me the curiosity to want to get to learn more about other people's cultures and backgrounds and so on. So, I really thank my parents a lot now for it because back then when you're younger, you're like, I don't want to get on a plane. I don't want to hang out with grandma in Germany and blah, blah, blah. I want to hang out with my friends here in the United States and so on. And then, looking back at it now, it was a great experience to kind of have that dual upbringing.
It's interesting. Yeah, thinking about putting my kids on a plane to go spend the summer with their grandparents right now. That's like an interesting concept. Well, I mean, yeah, I know as adults, we can be very reflective on cultural differences and we have like all of these things built up over time as a part of like who we are and how we fit into a cultural context and all that. But for a kid, there's less sort of stuff there. It's more like visceral, I'd say in some ways. Like for you, I'm just curious, as a child, what were some of the biggest differences you kind of noticed between the cultures? Were there like certain things you liked and disliked? Like, oh, I go to Germany and I don't get maybe it was as simple as like, they don't sell, nerds candy here or whatever, it could be that stuff. But like, was there more noticeable kind of things that you noticed, like a different vibe or, Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question, and you're absolutely right. There was a huge difference, because especially where I was in Germany, a small town called Schwalheim, it was more of a conservative atmosphere, and my grandma was very conservative, so it was very regimented. It was like, get up at 6, you're going down to the garden with me and help me pick strawberries and blueberries, and because everything we ate, she made, or we went, to the butcher and grabbed the food there, or we went into town and got the brötchen, the rolls of bread, to put the salami
Good
on.
bread there. Good bread there.
Very good bread. Yeah, very good bread. And very fresh. Every day it was fresh. There was no going down to a Safeway, for example, and buying it, or Costco and buying it in bulk and, eating it over the course of the week. It was every single day. So that regimented mentality I didn't have in the States. It was very, okay, yeah, walk to 7-Eleven, get your Mountain Dew, blah, blah, blah. But then at home you had frozen pizzas, you had, boxes of spaghetti that you would cook and so on. On my grandma's side, it was not like that. Everything was fresh. Everything was made to order that day. She was a heck of a cook, a heck of a baker. I wish I would have learned some of those recipes, that I was watching her cook at a young age. But, as a young kid, you don't care about those kind of things, But yeah, so that mentality of being a lot more structured, being a lot more disciplined, then served me very well moving forward in life, i.e. doing what I'm doing now. But it showed me hard work, dedication, staying on a regimented schedule was very beneficial in many ways that I would have never gotten that if I would have never spent my summer with the conservative grandmother in Germany.
Right. Well, I guess that was part of the experience that your dad at least knew he was sending you into. He's
That's
like,
right.
All right, we're going to get you.
That's right.
We're going to whip you into shape.
That's right. Throw me into the wolf's den because she was tough. She was tough. Yeah.
You don't want to mess around.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I mean, I can't even get my kids out of bed for school in the morning.
That's why we're
crazy.
talking at 1 o'clock, right?
That's funny. Well, I mean, I can see how that plays into what you've just done. I mean, having to climb Mount Everest or going for that is one piece of this, which involves, training and being regimented and disciplined and all the things you mentioned that you were exposed to as a child. And then the filmmaking aspect of it too adds like a whole other dimension. So yeah, we could talk about both of those sides. And I want to get into the climbing scene and all that. I do want to ask you first about one of the prominent themes. So by the way, we watched the movie. We were texting or I was emailing you. I can't remember. I said my kids had the ultimate compliment for this film because, we couldn't watch it all in one go because we were watching in the evening. They had to go to bed. So we had to like break it up over a couple nights. And when I turned it off, they started crying because they wanted to see the rest. So I was like, all right, there you go. That's like in my house, that's the ultimate compliment for a
I appreciate
film,
that.
so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And they, like you said, kids and pets, they're brutally honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was cool. I thought it was really cool that they were into it because, it's not like a children's movie, but they really were into it. And it brought me back. I mentioned to you, my wife and I had done a trek in Nepal some years ago. And, one of the cool parts about the film was that you didn't just like cut right to Everest. It was like the whole journey from Kathmandu to like getting there, flying in, like getting to Everest Base Camp, which, has the dual benefit of like giving you a chance to acclimatize, but also to be able to like walk through these villages and get to know more people and just kind of like get acclimated to the country and the landscape as well as the altitude. So I thought that part of it was really cool. And all of this stemmed from this childhood dream, which was a prominent theme in the film. And I wanted to unpack that a little bit. It's easy to kind of like the surface level thing is like very American, right? Like I went for this dream and then I fulfilled it and great. But like, we know there's a lot more nuance to it than that. Can you talk about the root of the dream and how sort of over time you eventually ended up going to the point where you're like, I'm actually going to embrace this dream and go for it? Looking for perhaps a little advice here for anybody that has a big dream as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point because it's really not about climbing Everest. It's about finding your own Everest and conquering that. Whatever that you set out in life that is your Everest, your challenge, be hyper focused about it and go after it because you might only have one crack at it. We don't know how many times we're going to be on this planet. Do we reincarnate? Like the Buddhists and the Hindus believe, or is it a one shot deal? We go to heaven or we just go back to earth, So it's one of these things we don't know that answer. And so when you have that compulsion, that passion to do something that's bigger than yourself, seize that and really, really try to do everything you can on a daily basis, even if it's only 5 minutes because you have a job that takes 8 hours a week and you have 2 children that you have to get to school and all these other things. If it's only 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes or whatever, over the course of that time, you set out that roadmap and that plan to hopefully get you that best chance to then conquer your own personal Everest. And in my case, what it was is I came back from a soccer practice. I was a competitive soccer player. I was 14 years old in Omaha, Nebraska, after a long 2-hour plus soccer practice, coming back home, doing my usual thing at a teenager, not knowing any better. Oh, let's slam down some Mountain Dew and have some Doritos, right? Which I couldn't fathom that I did that all the time, now at my age now. But back then I was like, oh yeah, whatever, I'm burning through it. You don't think about those things, metabolism and those kind of things. And then I saw something on TV about Mount Everest. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to climb that mountain. And the craziest thing is that was out of sight, out of mind for many, many years. I'm sitting on my couch in Denver, Colorado, watching random daytime television, absolutely nothing to do with mountaineering. I wasn't into hiking. I wasn't into mountaineering. I played traditional sports, I was a college athlete.
How old were you at this point, sitting on the couch?
I must have been like somewhere between 29 and 31, 32, something like that. So again, a long time has passed, 15 or more years has passed, and never thought about it since. And then for some dumb reason, watching whatever mindless television, Days of Our Lives or whatever it might have been, that recollection of my head popped back in and said, you know what, Alex, you promised yourself that one day you would climb Everest. And right then and there, I said to myself, you know what, if I can't keep a commitment to myself, how can I honor my commitments to anyone else? And the next day I started. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about mountaineering. I put on my snowboarding gear. I went and climbed a 14er, which is a 14,000 foot peak, and we have 54 of them here in Colorado. And I went in the middle of January and post-holing up to my chest, sweating my butt off because I'm overweighted, overdressed. But I struggled my way to the summit. And I made it up there. And I did a couple more like that. And again, it was horrible because, again, I didn't know what I was doing. Finally, I realized, okay, I got to get more formalized with this, learn about mountaineering, learn about wilderness survival, glacial travel, all the different things, rock climbing, lead climbing, trad climbing, sport climbing, all the different things that encompasses, serious mountaineering, and then going to climb different peaks that would get me prepared for something like Everest. Go out to Washington, climb Mount Rainier, go down to Argentina and climb the highest mountain in South America, Aconcagua, to see, okay, can I even hack altitude, right? It's a difference between doing 14,000 feet and 22,000 feet, and then even trying to go to 29,000 feet, whatever. Says it's a huge, huge difference. And it's this degenerative effect that accelerates in smaller and smaller margins the higher you go. Go to Denali, do expedition style stuff with, lugging all your own things over a glacier and climbing, the highest mountain in North America. And then ultimately, I was standing on the summit of Denali about 11:30 at night under that perpetual Alaskan summer sun that happens, where it just kind of dips, never goes down, and I'm standing up there all by myself with just my climbing partner. And I said, you know what? I can't continue just to try to make this Everest dream a reality only for these short fleeting moments of taking in the most beautiful views that my eyes have ever seen. I have to do something bigger with it because I'm risking my time, my life, my effort, all this going into trying to make this dream that I promised when I was 14 years old a reality. But I said, you know what? I got to do something bigger with this because I knew that 99% of this planet will never have the opportunity or the desire to go to Mount Everest. So I said, why don't I use some of my film experience, my acting experience, my international business background, and let's make a production out of it. And that's how the quest was born. And ultimately I said, okay, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here. I'm going to try to honor this childhood commitment that I made to myself, and B, hopefully to try to share it with the world. And if I'm lucky enough to make it to the top of the world and back and shoot it in 2D, for the documentary you're talking about, or VR, which is also out, the Quest Everest VR experience, then, it happens. And if not, then at least I give it a best whack,
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I mean, it's interesting too, thinking about how the TV show was the thing that sparked the idea in the first place. So maybe paying it forward to some of those future Everest dreamers in some way by putting something out there that somebody might catch their eye. Isn't it peculiar how the world works? Like how so many years later, this random thought just pops back into your head after not even thinking about it. And then, being in tune to the point where you just embrace it immediately. What a strange, almost spiritual experience in some ways. Because dreams or ideas and things can come back, but you don't necessarily all of a sudden be like, no, I'm doing that. And then tomorrow you're full on working towards it. It's just something in that moment grabbed you, I guess.
100%. I mean, I looked at myself and I said, what am I doing? Right. I said to myself, because, a lot of, and this again goes back to my upbringing, my German side of the things, my grandma, where your word is your word. A handshake was a handshake. You said you're going to do something, you do something. Even if you don't know how to do it, you're going to figure out how to do it. Right. And that's the upbringing that then served to benefit me from that moment on, because I said to myself, okay, Alex, you promised yourself, you got to keep a word to yourself. Right.
Learning to keep promises to yourself is
exactly. And then start to initiate that discipline and that training and all the stuff that I've learned, from this multicultural upbringing that I had. And then using my American entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff to figure out how I'm going to make this happen and to try to put that action into motion. And ultimately, it's a crazy thing. I mean, there was no reason why that dream ever came back in my head. I could have gone 30, 40 more years, and all of a sudden at that point, I would have missed the window anyway. So, it's crazy.
How long was it from I'm sitting on the couch watching Days of Our Lives, re-embracing this dream, to I'm flying into Kathmandu? What was just chronologically?
Yeah, it was a long process. So I would have to say that would have been about 12 years.
Wow.
About
Okay.
12 years total, between
So
all
you
the
spent,
training.
over a decade.
Yep, training, preparing, and then life factors come into play, right? Because I yet also got to say, if I'm going to go to Kathmandu, and I'm going to go not only just to Kathmandu, but I had to quit what I was doing prior to that in order to prepare for a year, training 2 to 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, stopping drinking, everything. I said to myself that one thing that wasn't going to be my limiting factor, because there's a lot of variables you can't control when it comes to try to climb something like Mount Everest. But the one thing I wasn't going to be a limiting factor was going to be my physical preparation. So I literally trained 7 days a week, didn't take one day off, 2 to 3 hours a day for a whole calendar year. Okay, then I had to get the film crew together. I had to put all the planning together. I had to put my other job, essentially I quit it in order to make that happen, right? So those things, then the Rome right, take a couple years just to get to that point. Say, okay, I'm going, and this is when I'm going, and hell or high water, I'm getting on that plane, So yeah, and it's that wrestling back and forth. Oh, maybe next year, or maybe next year, and then finally, when's the right time? And then finally, I said to myself, it's now or never. Yeah, let's go do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, with the training there, that's an example of kind of pursuing something like this. There's so many unknowns, right? Like that's the kind of thing that can stop people in their tracks on their dreams. But if you're focusing on, like you were there, the things that you can control, like you could control that you could go and train every day. That was something within your control, even though like the problem of like having to get a film crew and all this stuff, that was like almost like that's a problem for your future self in a way.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
Well, 12 years. Yeah, that's quite commitment, man. Congratulations. So, yeah, I want to talk about Nepal. You seem to really connect with the people there on a level that was, I don't want to say authentic, but just like it seemed to have like a genuine connection, I guess I would say. That takes time to get people to open up. It takes a special person like yourself, special skills. What is your advice for kind of getting in tuned with people that are involved in your travels and your adventures, getting them to open up, getting them to really connecting with them on a level that's deeper?
I think it comes back to a very simple tenet that I believe in. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what religion you believe in. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. And it doesn't matter what job you may or may not have. There's only two kinds of people on this planet, and that's good and bad. And as soon as you can break it down to that simple, it's so much easier in order to get yourself immersed in someone's culture and someone's day-to-day life, because you look at them as either a good person or a bad person. Not necessarily, oh, they speak French and I don't speak French, and they're Catholics and I'm Protestant, or whatever. You break it down to that simple of a point, you can really get into the humanistic element of that person that's standing across from you and really understand them. And it's almost like there's a sense, between the person that you're talking to, that they say, he seems like a good guy. He seems like he genuinely cares, because I do care. Because if I think you're a good person, then I want to know more about you, and I want to know more about your background, and I want to learn from you, and I want to experience with you different things. And I think that's probably the thing that's maybe helped me the most, is that when I break it down to a simple level, after all this traveling I've done, that there's only two kinds of people, good or bad, then it makes it very, very easy for me to be able to accept other people, other people's cultures, ways of life, and so on, and to be able to integrate with them.
Was that your first time in Nepal when you showed up for this?
Yeah,
so
first time.
Well, that adds another wrinkle to this in a way, because it's super fresh for you. What was the expectation coming in, and what was sort of the reality to that matchup?
In some ways it did, in some way it didn't. I knew that Kathmandu in Nepal was kind of this mysterious place. A lot of people, especially in the West, know nothing about Nepal. Most people in the United States couldn't even pick it out on a map or a globe. And if they think anything about Nepal, it's two things. It's either, maybe Doctor Strange, because I like Marvel movies and they shot some scenes in Kathmandu, or Mount Everest ever since 1953, when it was first climbed by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. It put Nepal on the map internationally, right? And so you have this mysterious thing about, well, what's it like? And, I met a kid once in college who at the University of Colorado where I went to school. He was from Kathmandu, and I always asked him questions about it. And there was a lot of intrigue. But when I got there, man, it is like no other place on the planet I've ever been to prior. You're almost thrown back 50 years, in the past, but with hyper modernization into the future. So it's like an organized, chaotic scene when you get to Kathmandu, right? And then to be able to run and gun and shoot and improvise and do all this stuff, because you can't set up shots like you can in the United States where you block off streets and you hire police officers for 8 hours in order to allow you to close off an area of town to film. No, none of that's going to happen at Kathmandu. It's complete organized chaos. So you just have to be able to run and gun, and I had to lean back on my improv comedy experiences and stuff in order to deal with the situation that I was put in order to try to get the content that I wanted. Then when I got up into the mountains themselves, up to Lukla, and we started trekking towards base camp, I had an expectation about, okay, this is going to be more of like an adventure atmosphere, but really it was more about adventuring in a spiritual atmosphere. And so it was completely different because you just see and can sense the spiritualism around every corner or in every little village along the Khumbu all the way to base camp. The Bon mysticism, the Tibetan Buddhism is so prevalent, so dominant, and such a big part of everyday life up there that after a course of time, not only do you kind of take a lot of respect for it, there's no way it can't somewhat affect you. And it took 52 days to climb Mount Everest. So it was 9 days to base camp, 43 days from base camp to the summit. And I spent a lot of time with Tashi Sherpa, who you see in the movie. He became like a brother from another mother father, as he calls me, because he was the first guy to pick me up at the airport in Kathmandu. I spent a lot of time with him in Kathmandu. I interviewed him a lot along the trail, along the trek to base camp. He was the guy that I spent most of the mountain with together. And so we had this inseparable bond that to this day I still communicate with him weekly. That it's a lifetime bond that will never be broken. And that was and he used to be a Buddhist monk for 12 years before he got into mountaineering. So his spirituality and his understanding of the world around you just slowly rubbed off on me. That something I would never expected was going to be what I was going to experience when I jumped on that plane from Denver to go to Kathmandu.
Is that element of it, is that some of those spiritual elements, were those things you identified with before the trip and then they were reinforced or perhaps opened up in new ways? Or was it just like not even a consideration? I mean, you knew about it, but you weren't personally.
Yeah. I was academically aware.
Right.
I always took fascination in the 5 major religions and all the other, regional religions around the world that I was interested in, from school days. But no, none of that stuff was even remotely on my mind, with the exception of get the people's stories, authentic stories, and then go from there and learn more and unpack further. But no way in heck did I have any inclination that this was what it was going to be like once I got there.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, because it's such a part of people's stories that it just is naturally discussed and brought around. Do you carry that stuff, any of those principles with you now?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah. I do in a large degree. More about maybe how I address everyday life. Of course, Everest taught me a couple things, that are invaluable to my everyday life now. But the spiritual side of things, which was never a big thing with me, I was more of a mutt when it came to a spirituality sense. Take a piece from these people, take a piece from these people, take a piece of these people, and then maybe that makes sense all together, kind of a thing. But just, the closer, ability to attune to the surroundings around me, the animals that I encounter with. I've always had this weird knack since I was a kid. I've never been bit by anything one exception. One animal only bit me once in my life, and that was a guard dog when I jumped in an area where I wasn't supposed to be. But outside that, I've handled all kinds of animals, wild animals, and I just have this weird sense to be able to bond with them. And I think that this kind of experience kind of helps me also get into the environment, the surrounding, where I am, be it with people, be it with nature, be it with animals, be it with just the people that I'm traveling with. It's just a weird sense that I can almost not even explain that I took from Nepal that's still, moving forward with me on the trips that I've had since.
What about the lessons from Everest that you mentioned that you still carry with you?
Yeah, the first thing is an obvious one. The obvious one is, for example, the day-to-day stuff that you took serious isn't that serious anymore. Oh, the Amazon guy didn't come to deliver my package. Oh, the trash guy didn't pick up my trash because, oh, it was Memorial Day yesterday. Oh, and it's not till next week till they'll come. The little things that annoy you, the little things that you've taken for granted aren't so serious anymore once you're talking about life and death scenarios on Mount Everest, and being broken down to the most primal survival situations from a humanistic standpoint, that these little things now, these, real world problems aren't such big problems anymore. And to see how people in a country like Nepal, that it's the 165th poorest country in the world, how they're able to get by day to day, right? Puts things in perspective. The second thing is on Everest, and I say this when I do speaking engagements and stuff, everyone, I don't care if you put in 80 hours a week this week, in your job. I don't care if you ran a marathon. I don't care if you've got, only 4 hours of sleep. Everyone has 20% more in their tank, because I was a college athlete, a Division I athlete, and I was in better shape when I went to Everest than when I played at the highest level of my competitive history. And even that didn't remotely compare to what Mount Everest was like. And the thing is, you need to be able to dig 20% deeper than you've ever dug in your life if you want to make it to the summit of Everest. But that's also that fine margin between living and dying. It's as thin as a strand of hair about whether or not you're going to make it up there and back down, or make it up there and never come back down, or never make it up there at all. It's really that of a fine margin. And a lot of these variables that you can't control, that you have to deal with on the fly, arise under very stressful situations. So if you can't dig 20% deeper, you're never going to make it. And so how that carries forward now is, oh, I have to get this done. Man, I've been working 80 hours a week. Okay, I can do 96 if I have to for a deadline. Or, I ran a marathon. Well, I can run another, 6 to 8 miles. I can go over 30 miles if I have to, all right? Or in a survival situation, if you have to get out of a really, really dicey survival situation, you can have that mentality, dig 20% deeper, you can make it happen. And that's also going to help you achieve that dream, right? Conquer your own personal Everest. It just might be that extra 20% that gets you to where you want to be.
I wanted to get your thoughts on the climbing scene, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Everest is, there's so much to it, man. Like if anybody listening, they've read the books like Into Thin Air, most famously, and seen documentaries and followed any of the climbing seasons, and there's always news that comes out, and it seems like there's this mix of like kind, incredible people like yourself going for a dream, some people that probably don't belong there at all, that are endangering other people's lives, big egos, big money in some cases. There's ethical questions around this. What is the climbing scene like? Your honest take.
I tell you what, first and foremost, when you arrive at Everest Base Camp, it's like an international tent city. You literally have the United Nations on a floating slab of ice called the Khumbu Glacier there for 2 months. From people all walks of life all across the world, all there driven under the same, either a dream or the same goal. Even you might not interact with any of those people. It's really interesting because you can just sense, that everyone there is there for the same reason. Now, whether that's for a good reason or a bad reason, and how serious of a reason, all these different things can vary. But it's basically an international tent city for 2 months, and so that's very interesting to begin with. You hear every language you can imagine. You see every kind of culture and experience all that then you can imagine. Then, of course, your teammates are usually an international bunch.
Yeah, you had a Norwegian on your team.
Yeah, I did. I had a Norwegian on my team. So yeah, so we had the three other climbing teammates. Brazil, Norway, Turkey. And then me, the United States. So a pretty wide swath of different cultures there. So yeah, and then you have to get and to be able to not only interact with them but to work with them as a team, because a lot of success on Everest and mountains like that, big expeditions, I don't care if it's across the desert or whatever, is team dynamics. If the team dynamics don't work, you're already behind the 8 ball. And oftentimes that could be the difference between an expedition failing or being successful. Might not even be because of the other factors that would have allowed it or not. It's the team dynamic. So you have to be able to, have a strong and a very constructive team dynamic. And a lot of teams don't have that there because, again, they're coming from all across the world and they're thrown together in this melting pot that they then have to coexist in and then try to achieve a common objective. The other thing is everyone there's type A, right? So it's a very interesting thing. I mean, you're talking about highly trained people, highly motivated people, some people that have trained their whole life and set their whole life in motion for this one opportunity to achieve, the goal of climbing Everest, be it because of work, what kind of company is going to give you 60 days off to go off to Nepal? Nobody.
There's a lot at stake.
Yeah, there's a lot of stake. An awful lot of stake.
Personal,
and then, of course,
personal things.
Yeah, a lot of personal things. And so that heightens, of course, then the severity of it all, right? Because when you have so much at stake, be it a personal thing that's at stake, be it a financial thing that comes into play, you have family back home, that you want to try to get back to. So that it elevates the risk and the danger even more, So there's a lot of things that come into stake. And so because of that, you have all these type A people that no one's really going to tell you to put the brakes on. So you don't necessarily have that birdie over your shoulder that's saying, you know what, things aren't looking good. You should probably go back down, right? And hence, a lot of people then get in trouble. I mean, there's 340 people that have died on Everest. So, and every year people are going to die. There's no way around it. It's just inevitable. So, to know that and then to all of a sudden put yourself in that situation and then everything you read about Everest, everything you've seen about Everest, and I've studied everything. I've been an Everest geek for a long time. You can throw it right out the window as soon as you put your first step in the Khumbu Icefall. It's just Russian roulette. Just throw it right out the window. And if you're not able to give some of your control over to the mountain, you're never going to go any further. And I was with world-class athletes, and you see some of those guys get to that first ladder crossing where you have 3 or 4 or 5 Home Depot-style ladders tied together by fishing twine, and it's moving up and down 2 to 3 feet because it's flexing, and over across a crevasse that could be 1,000 feet deep, and you only have about 1 inch on the front and 1 inch on the back of your crampons that give you the purchase on the rungs, and you start to shake, and then you just see people freeze up like deer in headlights. And you're talking about world-class athletes. So if you don't have that mental toughness or that preparation or that ability to give up some control, which a lot of type A people can't, to the mountain and say, you know what, it's out of my hands, then a lot of times you're not going to get any further, And in my case, I was lucky because I was also filming, so that kind of distracted me. It was almost like a war reporter scenario where you're in a combat zone, you're just filming, and then you get that false sense of security that, like, well, bullets aren't going to hit me because I'm not a combatant. I'm just
There's like accountability built in a way too. Like, people got to see this. I got to make it somewhere on this journey.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. I was beholden to the project too, not just to my childhood dream. Yeah. I was at this point also beholden to my project. So I became like a war reporter looking through a lens and not even being focused oftentimes of the danger all around me. And so that was a good thing from the standpoint it kept me from getting scared or worried about some of the things that I may have worried about. But it's also a bad thing because it could also push me to the point of getting killed. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting place that I don't think can be replicated anywhere else. For example, you would never, ever climb through the Khumbu Icefall, ever, anywhere in the world. It doesn't exist on any other mountain except for on Everest, because you wouldn't do it because that's just that dicey and so ridiculous. But if you want to climb to the top of the world, that's the risk you got to take if you come in from the Nepal side. So
wow. Yeah, it's really interesting, the psychology and the dichotomies you shared with, on the one hand you have like you said, these people that have a lot of stake. They've worked their whole lives, maybe they've spent a lot of money, they've been training and all this stuff. So it's a lot at stake, but it's all self-imposed. Like, nobody has to go climb a big mountain and risk their life. It's a complete choice. So it's like they have a lot at stake, but they're doing it to themselves. It's not like, you're running from a tornado and you have a lot of stake and it's completely out of control. Like, you're choosing to do this. So
yeah. Or the wildfires in Los Angeles, for example. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's self-induced stress. It's self-induced torture. So it's very sadistic in much of a way, you know. And yeah, it's like I said, it's a very strange construct, to say the least, when you really unpack it like that,
Well, I mean, one of the things the documentary didn't really show was, like I saw on social media pretty recently, the sort of the infamous line at the Hillary step, like coming up to the summit, where it's just like, way too many people waiting to get in. And the way the documentary was shot, I'm sure there were times where it was clogged up and you had to get and wait. And I'm not sure, on your summit day, what it was like, because I didn't really see that in the documentary. This isn't a criticism, by the way. It's just, I'm just wanting to get your take on that element of the mountain. Like, should this many people be doing it? There's like all these ethical questions around, okay, it's the same kind of questions my wife and I had when we went and did a trek. We're like, should we get a porter? Like, should we like let somebody carry our stuff? Is that like not cool? But then like, oh, well, we're giving somebody a job, and there's like sort of the element of this can help the economy and help people. It keeps people employed. And then in Everest case, it's more extreme than like trekking, because then you're like, okay, but as you know, some of these Sherpas and these people, they like, because there's a lot of money at stake for these clients and a lot at stake personally, they will perhaps maybe go up to a place that they shouldn't based on a certain weather condition, because the accountability of, well, these people paid, I got to get them up, that's my job, which isn't really on a human level something that we should ask of people, right? Like, yeah, risk your life because I gave you money. Like, that's not right. So there's but that's what happens a lot in Nepal. Like people go over passes and things because, improper footwear, all kinds of stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, we've got two really deep questions here. One was the lines that you're talking about on Everest, No, what you see in the films is authentic. We had none of it. I had the whole upper mountain to myself with this.
Wow. Okay. I feel like that's kind of rare.
It's very rare.
Climbing season.
It's very rare, and that's where I don't want to give it away too much, but you can see the Tenzing Norgay, Sir Edmund Hillary component to the whole thing, because we were up there like as if we were, first time back in 1953, all by ourselves, experiencing this together. And that was just a set of circumstances that kind of panned itself out. And the way it works with regards to the lines and the traffic jams that you see in social media, a lot of that is not always the case, but again, social media itself will always play the bad then versus the good, right? Yeah. They're always going to show. But
it does happen, and
it's like
it's in a death zone where
it is. But here are the factors that come into play. First of all, it's how many permits Nepal. Usually in China's side, it's not as much of an issue, right? Because, for example, China shut down the mountain for 4.5 years. They didn't let anybody there at all. And it's up to them. There's no rhyme or reason. They just decide when they want to do it. Oh, there's an uprising in Tibet. Okay, we don't want any people from around the world seeing that going on because, the Chinese have been quelling Tibet for a long, long time. Okay, so that could be one reason why they shut down the mountain. Oh, we're going to try to run the torch up to the summit for the Beijing Olympics. Okay, we'll shut the mountain down. Who cares if you paid $60,000? Too bad you're not climbing today. And then there's no recourse to it, right? On the Nepal side, what happens is the Nepalese government, the Mountaineering Authority, they give X amount of permits out. So each year that varies of how many climbers are going. So some years there's more, some years are less. So that's the first factor that comes into play. The second factor then is how many summit days are available, right? Because every year, Everest is climbed in May. You get up to the summit in May. I mean, you start in April, but by the time you finally get a chance for the summit, a month and a half later, it's in May. The reason why, for example, if you're trying to climb Everest right now, the wind speed could be between 100, 200 miles an hour. You're not going up there. It's not going to happen, besides all the other factors. So what happens is there's a low pressure system called the monsoons that come off of India and the Bay of Bengal, and it pushes up into the Himalayas in the beginning of May. And what that does every year, it pushes the jet stream that flies over the summit of Everest, literally the jet stream that goes around the whole planet, flies it over the summit of Everest just off of the summit far enough, either into the Tibetan Plateau or either a little bit farther south, but it makes it wobble and makes it move long enough that you have this little window that opens up for you to try to go for the summit. Right? Some years it could be 1 day, 2 years. Some days it could be 2 weeks, broken up over the course of 3 days here, 4 days here, and so on. Right? And then you have a limitation factor. The climbing season always ends June 1st, no matter what. Hell or high water, your expedition is done June 1st. That's what your permit says, to go try your summit permit that you pay between $11,000 and $15,000 for, just for a piece of paper, to try to give you a chance to climb that mountain. So now you have timing factors. When is the monsoon going to push it up there? How many weather windows are going to be open? And nobody really knows. It's just projections. Matter of fact, our projections came from Belgium, nowhere close to Nepal. It's not like localized weather. Today it's 72 and sunny. No, it's not like that. It's based off global weather patterns, high pressure systems, because, and then Everest is so big, it creates its own weather. And so you have all these just predictions and projections based on what's going on around the whole globe, not what's really localized. And so once you make that decision to leave base camp for the last time to go for the summit, you hope you've made that right projection and you're all in. You either make it, you don't make it, you die. It's a complete gamble. And so if the weather projections say on some of those years there's only 3 good days or 2 good days, well, what do you think is going to happen? Let's say this year, or let's say XYZ year, there's a record number of permits issued by the Nepalese government. Weather, for example, there could have been a cyclone that came in early, which then limited one of the climbing rotations, because you have to climb Everest multiple times, essentially, before you go for the summit. You have to move gear up the mountain. You have to produce more red blood cells in your system, shock your body to produce more red blood cells to the altitude, so you're acclimatizing, so you're going up and down, up and down. Well, let's say if you missed one of those rotations because there was a bad weather that came in early, now you're behind schedule. Okay. And then now let's say there's only 1 or 2 weather days to try to make it to the summit. What do you think is going to happen? You have 800 people all going at the same time trying to make it up there. Right. And so that's when you have these catastrophic, scenes that you can see on social media where there's lines queued up on the Hillary step, on the Lhotse face, and so on. And then, of course, that lends itself to its own set of problems, where then you're going to have a higher propensity of people dying, running out of air, therefore they die of altitude sickness, heart attacks, these kind of things, exposure to the elements because it's brutally cold up there. It can be very windy, it can be very nasty, So, yeah, those are the things that can happen. So it's, like I said, that's that Russian roulette element to it. You don't know. And when you get your permit, you don't know how many total permits have been issued. You don't know how busy the mountain's going to be. You don't know how many weather windows are going to be there. You don't know what kind of physical condition you're going to be in by the time a month and a half later comes around, and whether or not you can have the energy, the stamina after deteriorating for so long. I lost 27 pounds of muscle mass, not fat. I was, 4 to 6% body fat when I left Kathmandu because of how hard I was training. I left Denver, Colorado, 197 pounds. I got back to Kathmandu at 170 pounds. It looked like I escaped a concentration camp. That's how much the mountain beat you up. So all these other factors that then come into play, can lead to a perfect storm, so to speak, in those situations.
Yeah. Okay.
But in our case, we didn't have that at all.
Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down. You guys had a good.
Now, the moral issue from the climbing, with the Sherpas and stuff, I guess if you want to talk about that, it's a very interesting thing. We talk about it in the movie, that. And so the Sherpa people, it's also very interesting for them because, as one Sherpa says in the film, again, I don't want to give it all away, but he says, if it wasn't for Mount Everest, our life would be completely different, right? You go one valley over that doesn't have Mount Everest, they're yak herders, salt traders. They're very rural people with no economy of scale whatsoever. You go to the Khumbu Valley, the dead end of the Khumbu Valley happens to be Mount Everest. Other side of that's China, Tibet, however you want to look at it. And because the highest mountain in the world is at the end of the valley, during the spring and even the fall, trekking and climbing season, it's the second wealthiest place in all of Nepal, are in those 2 months. And the Sherpa people that work, because of their genetic disposition to altitude after coming over from the Kham region of eastern Tibet 640 years ago and settled in the Khumbu Valley, after generation after generation after generation, they built up about a 10%, 15% advantage to altitude. They become disposed to being the perfect people to work in that environment, to not only carry loads, but to live up there and so on. And so they have a huge genetic advantage to, let's say, the average person that goes over there. So they're built to be, porters and guides and to be climbers. And so ever since, the 20s when they first started to climb Everest, but once it really became something that became commercialized in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, when people started thinking, well, let's try to bring people over here and, climb this, as a climber purist initially first, and then later on became more of an economic thing for the Sherpa people. It started to build the villages, the tea houses. They now have facilities that they wouldn't have: running water, cell phones, electricity, all this kind of stuff. And they get paid depending on who the Sherpa is, what rank they are, what company, what kind of outfit they're with, which is a huge swath across the board. Anywhere between $5,000 to $35,000 in 2 months. Well, in a country where the average median income is $2,000, that's 3 years of work in 2 months, up to 20 years of work if you're making $35,000 or $40,000 like some of the top guys do, right? You're almost like an NBA basketball player. So now they have this catch-22. If I don't do it, I'm not going to make the real kind of money that I can make to my disposal. But on the same token, it's also something that's very dangerous, right? And then the spiritual element also comes in. Right.
Yeah,
and
because the mountain's holy for them.
It's very holy. And we talk about it in the movie, and you get a perspective from one of the older Sherpas that talked about the guilt complex he had when he first got to the summit for the first time on Everest, how he felt guilty to stand on top of the goddess mother of the world, or Chomolungma, as the Sherpa people call her. And it's a very interesting thing because that is the physical embodiment of the Mother Earth, where we have this vague construct in the West. Oh, it's the weather, it's the clouds, it's the sun. No. For the Sherpa people and the Tibetan people, it is Mount Everest. Hence why they do the puja ceremonies and ask for permission and blessing and all that stuff. It is Mount Everest. It is a goddess. It is the goddess mother of the world, or goddess mother of the earth. So it's a very sacred place for them. So now they have that little tension inside them, their religious tension in them. Well, should I even climb this mountain? And the more, the younger Sherpas don't grow up with that as much as the older ones do. And of course, it's become very, it's gotten a lot of publicity around the world with regards to Mount Everest, and a lot of Instagram Snapchats. Oh, I'm trekking to base camp, I'm doing this. So that's also kind of lowered the bar a little bit about the guilt complex from a spiritual standpoint for the Sherpa people, because they're on cell phones, they're on Instagram now. They want to take advantage of all the new modern nuances that the modern world provides, that they're now having access to. So it's a very, very interesting situation when you take those three elements and put it all together about whether or not they should or should not climb Mount Everest.
Yeah, thanks. Another great breakdown. It's giving people a taste of what they'll find in the movie as well, which is cool. They should definitely check it out. We'll link up to everything in the show notes. Some of the problems you alluded to, I mean, just in your experience, and it's interesting to talk to you because you were a climber, you're taking the meta viewpoint, capturing this through your documentary. So you have a lot of perspectives here. I'm just wondering, like, if you could wave a magic wand, like, again, everybody's going to have their own opinions, but with some of the problems we discussed, what can be done to fix it, or what would you do, or what are some of the glaring sort of like systemic changes that need to happen, if any?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to limit, for example, the deaths every year on Everest, or potentially limit them, because you can't necessarily predict how they're going to happen. Statistically, there's certain areas of the mountain where more people are going to die and so on. That's statistically, but it doesn't mean every year after year that's going to be the case. So if you limit the number of permits on the mountain and maybe up, for example, the amount of experience you have to have, they've already, instilled, new guidelines where you have to be able to have climbed a 7,000 meter peak before you go to Nepal to try to climb Everest. They're trying to push that to an 8,000 meter peak, meaning 26,000 feet. There's only 14 of them around the world, to do another one before you try to get to Everest. Well, if you start to implement those things and limit the amount of permits, well, obviously that would limit, the traffic jam scenarios, or the likelihood of them to happen would be a lot less. Right. So that would be one thing for sure. The flip side of that, then, it also eliminates tourism dollars, not only to the Khumbu Valley, but also back to Kathmandu, to the government officials that actually give out these permits and make money off of it. Right. So, and the Sherpa people that look for a job every spring to either be a porter or a cook or a climber or a guide or whatever the case may be. So if you limit that, you're also limiting that. So, it's a really a catch-22. But if you wanted to eliminate For example, the possibilities, for either traffic jams or incidences that could lead to more fatalities. The obvious first solution would be to limit the number of permits that are handed out by the Nepalese government.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has your relationship with death changed after this experience?
Yeah, I think it kind of has to some degree, because maybe I respect it more and fear it less, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I respect it more because when you see a dead body laying in the snow,
You saw them on the way?
I saw, yeah.
Yeah.
And one part in the movie, I didn't want to hit on it too much, right? Because it wasn't about that. But I do mention it in both films, actually, the VR and also in the 2D documentary that you and your family watched. There was a scenario, and I was all by myself. Again, I had the whole upper mountain with only one other person when we left Camp 4 up to the balcony, which is kind of this landmark area where it then gets onto the southeast ridge all the way to the summit, and that's the dividing border between Tibet or China and Nepal. And so if you fell on this side of the mountain, you'd fall into Nepal. Fell on this side, you'd fall into China or Tibet. And that's the balcony. And that's also one of those critical time markers you need to make at a certain time to know, okay, am I going fast enough? Am I doing good enough in order to then have enough oxygen reserves and enough time before the darkness falls? Because you don't want to be up there when it's dark. You want to get back down to Camp 4 before it's dark. You don't want to be stuck out there in the dark. So am I going to make these checkpoints, right? Very methodical kind of checkpoints that you have to try to have in your inner head. Okay, I got to get here by this time, otherwise I need to turn around, kind of a thing. So I was climbing with my buddy who was the expedition leader all throughout the night until the balcony, and then from there I climbed by myself, and I waited for Tashi, and then him and I went the rest of the way. The thing is, you have that. I was at a situation right below the balcony where Ryan was a little bit farther in front of me, and I looked over and I said, you know what, I want to film this, but I want to experience this as well, which is going to be the most beautiful sunrise I would ever envision in my life, from 27,300 feet or so, approximately, the sun coming over the Tibetan plateau, and everything just blew up in bright orange. And I looked to the right at the fourth highest mountain. I looked to the right to the fifth highest mountain in the world, and these Himalayan giants all around me, and these massive expansive plateaus and glaciers. And I said, I'm just going to stand here and take this in, watch the dark come to light. But then I saw this strange rock, and I'm like, that's an interesting looking rock. And then as more of that orange light came onto it, I was like, ooh, that's not a rock at all. And then I got to see, okay, that's a dead body, and it's about 10, 15 feet in front of me. And I'm all by myself. So now your mind's playing tricks with you, because you're already feeling half drunk because you're so hypoxic, right? It's that martini effect. The higher you go, it's like drinking another martini. And I'm trying to stay hyper focused because I know how severe the situation is. But on the same token, I'm trying to take in the situation around me, because how just the grandeur of it all, how amazing it was, how beautiful it was, and how serene it was, being all by myself there. And then when I saw that body, he was wearing the exact same down suit that I was wearing. And so it was like almost looking at yourself dead in the snow. And then I said to myself, who is this person? Why is he laying there dead in the snow? Why am I still standing up on 2 feet? I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know how long he's been there. Not a clue. And so your mind starts racing. And then I kept telling myself, okay, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't sit down, because if you sit down, you might never get back up. Just keep moving 3 feet at a time. Stare straight ahead, 3 feet at a time. And so when that sunrise went a little further, and I turned away from that body, and I said, okay, mission at hand, keep going. But that really kind of rings you there when you come across a situation like that, and that's something you don't deal with in an everyday scenario.
Yeah, what a mix there, going from the beauty of the sunset to this experience. It's that's encapsulates part of the Everest experience, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of these, like we mentioned, the dichotomies and sort of the yin and yang, death and life. And that's it's one of the things I think that's so compelling about Everest stories. Everybody's like, I'm walking on this hairline thread, like you said. I can't think of a place on Earth where, outside of a war zone, where you're like passing dead bodies in that way, like just maybe regularly in some way. I don't really know. I mean, they can't get them off the mountain because it's too difficult, right? I always thought, this is just a dumb logistical question, but I always thought that, I mean, if you have the bottled oxygen, aren't you getting like the full oxygen, or do you still feel the effects of the altitude?
No, it only makes a subtle difference. That being, though, also the difference about whether or not you make it, or the difference of whether or not you make it back down alive. So yeah, it's not.
Is it
what
because you
people think.
can't put it on full blast because you can't carry that much?
That's part of it. That's part of it. But also, the amount of pressure, the barometric pressure up there is so small that you're so hypoxic. For example, they've taken blood saturation levels from people. Matter of fact, during our climb, there was a Olympic cyclist, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, world record holder, best rider on the planet on a bike. I couldn't get above 21,000 feet. And it had nothing to do with being physically tough or mentally tough. Obviously, they're gold, medal winners. They could probably jump on a bicycle and ride it from, I don't know, pick a city, from Paris all the way to Warsaw in one city.
Altitude doesn't discriminate.
Does not discriminate, and you can't take your VO2 max with you. So that's a genetic thing. Assuming you do everything else right, stay hydrated, prepare yourself, blah, 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 which I know that this person did. It's a genetic thing. So you got to choose your parents wisely and you don't know until you go. Right. And so, but that person had 18%, oxygen saturation level, which is like coma state. They were within a couple hours of dying, and that was at 21,000 feet. And if they would have gone much higher, there would have been no way of any kind of rescue. So they had to get a helicopter rescue, go all the way back to Kathmandu, lower altitude. Again, these are things you don't know until you go. You don't know how your body's going to respond to such hypoxic and extreme altitudes like that, until you go. And then you're in that situation, right? And again, if you're a driven person, sometimes you lie to yourself, and you're constantly lying to yourself on Everest anyway, because your body's saying, what are you doing here? I don't belong here. This hurts. This is miserable. And you just continue to lie to yourself 50 feet at a time. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And then you start to tune out maybe some of the things that you would normally be attuned to if you're sitting on a bicycle in an Olympic environment at sea level, right? You might be more attuned to it than if you're at 21,000 feet at Camp 2 on Everest. So.
I know we're talking about a lot of different things. We are gonna get your feelings when you're at the summit here. I know I want to end on the highest note possible, which is the summit of Mount Everest. Yeah, for anybody listening, it's like, wow, like this is one of my dreams too. A little mini segment I'll call, how to climb Mount Everest. We can't really, I'm joking, because we can't unpack that. That's probably like its own whole entire podcast series, which maybe you should do, Alex. How much does it cost? I know the costs vary. Like, we talked about the time commitment. There's that cost too. Like, it takes a couple months just to do this whole thing, opportunity costs, all that stuff, but just straight, like logistics, costs, getting permission. You don't have to go like step by step, but just give people a sense of like, if they're like, yeah, I want to do that one day, or maybe I want to climb one of these other big mountains. And yeah, maybe you can give them some advice here.
Yeah, the Everest thing it gets more expensive. As a matter of fact, it's just gone up a minimum of $4,000 more because they've raised the permit. The summit.
Did you just save money for this? Like,
yeah.
Many years. I mean,
yeah. I mean, or mortgage your house. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways about going about it. I actually mortgaged my house to do it.
You did? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess there would be an indirect benefit if I didn't come back. I'd have to pay the mortgage. but yeah. So yeah, I mean, so the pricing is all across the board. The cheapest, if you did it absolutely dirt cheap, which I would not recommend because of the safety factors. But if you did it absolutely dirt cheap, backpacker, kind of style, a dirt bag.
I didn't even know that was possible on Everest.
Yeah, the cheapest would be somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000.
Oh my God!
And going up to $120,000, even up to $150,000,
wow.
Depending on what you want. But yeah, that's about the range. I would say it's probably around $40,000 to $150,000.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But if you also look at the cheap operators, all of which the cheapest ones are all Nepali, which a lot of which are Chinese companies, they also have the highest death rates on Everest. So
right.
You got to kind of weigh that.
Yeah, definitely. Who was filming this whole thing, man?
Well, multiple people.
Okay.
Kathmandu and up to base camp, we had 7 2D cameras running. Then at
Yeah.
base camp, and you saw, in the movie that one of our guys got emergency heli-evac'd off of base camp because of altitude sickness, and so he was gone. One of our cameramen had to leave. Then so when at the rest of the time at base camp, we were filming interviews and so on. And then when that was done, I sent those guys home, and I said, okay, then the climbing part, because the hardest part of making this documentary is being able to climb Mount Everest. So that eliminates also not only 99% of the people in the world that want to do it, but also then unfortunately eliminates 99% of the people that would pick up a camera and film doing this. So I said, okay, well, I know that my buddy who was the expedition leader, he was going to go for the summit. I know Tashi, my Sherpa friend, the head Sirdar, the head mountain guide, he was going to go for the summit. So then me, Tashi, and Ryan did all the mountain filming through the ice falling up because we were going to go for the summit. So us three had cameras. Yeah.
I mean, on the filmmaking side, is this your first foray into like adventure filmmaking, you could call
like
it?
extreme adventure filmmaking, yes.
Right.
And it was so tough because batteries not working,
Yeah.
cameras fogging up.
I mean, you got all this stuff to
yeah.
deal with. Why
Yeah.
why did you even, I mean,
I'll tell you why.
Talk about that side of it.
The reason why, and goes back to more of the business side of things, the reason why, choosing Everest, not just because it was a childhood dream, I was going to go anyway, but the reason why I then ultimately turned into the quest, comes back from the Denali days, standing on the summit and saying, okay, let's make this into a production. But the reason why that was picked to be the first one was because when I was pitching it to Nat Geo and Discovery Channel, Netflix, and all these people, they liked the idea because what we did do is the first ever 2D and VR combination. Not only climb a Mount Everest, but the first ever ongoing series. This is an ongoing series, so it's going to be future quests that happen, and we talk about that later. But when I pitched that initial idea, they loved the idea. However, they said, well, hold on a second. This is your first time going to Everest. Okay. You're also going to be filming part of this yourself. Oh, and you're also the on-camera host of this thing. And the odds of climbing Everest aren't very high to begin with. We're not going to put our money behind you. Good luck. Yeah. Now, why should we? And I get it. From a business standpoint, it makes zero sense. So I said, okay, well, fine. I will mortgage my own house. I will take it on the chin. I will go do this. I'll risk my life literally to go do this. And if I come back down with 63 hours of footage that I did in 2D and in virtual reality, and I'm humbly honored to have done so, and if I'm successful to do that, then I've made a proof of concept a reality. And now I know that any other quest that I do moving forward, we can do because we tested that out on the hardest possible.
But do you want to do it again?
Well, not Everest, but yeah, to go shoot the next one. Yeah, sure. And so, but now I know we're pretty certain, pretty confident that if we go to whatever location, we can replicate that formula because we did it under such brutal environmental conditions on Everest.
Worst case scenario, right? In a way.
Yeah, and so
you did like the hardest thing first.
The dumbest thing first. And that's what's funny too. I talked to Ryan. Because I'm climbing the 7 summits, for example, the highest points on each continent. Well, he said, Alex, if you're going to climb the 7 summits, which I plan on doing, you did the 3 hardest first. It was not the way you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work your way up to it. I did the 3 hardest first, but that's just the way it worked out. So
yeah, okay. And now this is your new career, adventure filmmaking. Adventure?
Yeah, documentary filmmaker, not necessarily adventure driven so much. It's as you see in the movie, and that's why the cultural aspect was so important. The quest, the tagline about the quest is, to take the audience on these educational thrill rides to reveal these rarely seen stories from some of the most captivating places on earth, especially in the West and in Europe and so on. You don't see these kind of stories. And so that's the key. So it's not so much about Mount Everest, it's more about the people, the Sherpa people that you see, the Hinduism, the Buddhism that you see down in Kathmandu, and the economic factors of Everest and historical aspects of Everest and even the environmental aspects of Everest, that kind of stuff that you normally wouldn't see about a movie that has Everest content in it. That's what it's really about. And it's not even about me. As you know, in the movie, yes, I'm the host, but I'm just the conduit to the information. I'm the conduit to Tashi's story. I'm the conduit, to Lakbarita's story. I'm the conduit to Kumar's story, and so on. And that's really the point of it, is that I take people on these educational thrill rides. And so it doesn't have to be with mountains. It doesn't have to be necessarily adventurous, even though the next one will have some adventure elements as well that we're going to film this year. It's not about, doing, crazy adventure stuff. It's going to be more about the culture, the history, the backstory of what that location entails.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I loved about it, man. I just want to give you props here because that came through,
Oh, I appreciate that.
The idea of the conduit and really giving the Nepalese people like a starring role and the culture and all of that type of stuff, I think is what, to me, was the most engaging part. It wasn't about like making climbers rock stars. It was about making everybody that helps get them to the top, showing that they're the rock stars, in many ways. I mean, the climbers still have to get up and do it. Of course, it's no small thing, obviously, but but it takes all of these people. They're not doing it by themselves.
It's a team effort. No matter
and so
what.
just giving the cultural aspects, and I like the educational thrill ride sort of concept. Where are you going next?
Africa.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Next one's going to be in Africa.
How does it feel to have created like this whole new career for yourself in a way?
It's almost like that was the purpose. I might have not known the purpose, but it seems like, obviously this is what I should be doing. Right.
Sure.
And again, it comes full circle. And so now it's a reality, and now it's the purpose. I feel it. It's just, that's my purpose.
Was the mortgaging your house for the film too, or did you get funding for that?
No, it's for all of it. It's for all of it. Again, it was like this close, and it was a carrot and a stick deal. So do I keep pushing on? Do I get, discover someone else to finally cough up the money? Or do I say, you know what? You can continue to push and push and push. You might wait all day and never make that happen. So screw it.
You just went all in. That's why. That's not everybody that can do that, man.
And by the things, I don't have any kids. If I had kids, I would never do that. It'd be too narcissistic, too financially risky to do that. But I had no one back at home that was financially dependent on me, so I could do such a dumb thing.
You're a good dude, Alex. All right, tell us how it felt. I know this is the typical question, but we have to just step into your shoes at the top of Mount Everest. Now, the caveat to this whole thing is that most people die coming down. So I can't imagine that's tempered with, okay, yeah, great, I'm here, but I got to get down now, which is like when you summit any mountain, right? Like if anybody's listening to summited a mountain, I've climbed, like a 14er in Colorado. It's like you want to get down before the rainstorms come in. Like, great, I'm here. Let me get my ass down now.
That's right. That's right. Right.
But, still, wow. I mean, you're there. You guys had it all to yourselves, like you mentioned, not to ruin it, but tell us about the moment.
Yeah, I tell you what, the first thing I did was, and you see it in the film, I break down and cry. And because I was giving my respects to Chomolungma, I actually bowed to the prayer flags. Tibetan prayer flags are up there on the summit. And again, this is Tashi rubbing off on me over the course of these days, 50 days or so. By this time it was 50 something days that I was with Tashi. And it rubbed off on me. The significance and how much Chomolungma meant to him, had a direct impact on what it felt like to me. So I had this complete emotional release. It was a combination of my respect to Chomolungma allowing me the opportunity to stand up on our vaulted summit. It was my respect to Tashi to be there with me in this bromance kind of a moment. It was, the culmination of that dream since I was 14 years old, that it was a reality. I did what I said I was going to do and promised myself I was going to do, 12 years of training and planning and all that stuff to finally get there on top of it. And all that stuff. And that was the first thing I did. I cried and paid my respects to Chomolungma. And then after that, Tashi and I had a great bromance and hugged, and, you see that on camera up there too. And then I was up there for 45 minutes with them all by ourselves, just taking in the most amazing view. Yeah, looking 200 miles into hundreds of miles into China, hundreds of miles into India, hundreds of miles into Nepal, and just taking in the most beautiful scenes that these eyeballs have ever seen in my whole life. And then finally, ironically, the reason why we had to come down, and it was probably getting to that point sooner or later anyway, was Tashi was getting cold, and his hands were getting cold, and so I gave him my mountaineering down mitts, and then I took his gloves instead. He was getting cold, and the reason why he was getting cold is his regulator froze up on him, and that's a dangerous situation there, 29,032 feet. So we actually went down only about 50 vertical feet from the summit. There's this little like kidney-shaped, wind-blown little place that you can sit down in, that we could dig a little bit of blockage from the wind and sit there and mess with this regulator. We finally got the thing to flow again. It got us oxygen to flow again. Thank God. And then from there, the rest of the team that was on our team that was still trying to make it to the summit, they came up. I gave, and this is not in the movie, I had 1 liter of water with me, and this is a crazy thing because they didn't even say a single word to me. 2 of my teammates were coming up, and they looked like just zombies. They looked like they were just going to die right in front of me. They were so exhausted. And they just both put their hand out like this. And I knew right away what they needed without them saying anything to me. And I gave them my only liter of water, and they just both guzzled half of it, and just like they're slamming a beer, like they're, beer bonging the thing. And they were that parched, and they were that spent physically. And I gave it to them. And so then Tashi and I went down. They went for the summit. They went up to the summit, got to the summit, and then Tashi and I went back down. And then as we went down, we kept looking back up on the ridge just to check on our team. Tashi had a walkie-talkie. He would call into Ryan, say, "Oh, how's things going?" We couldn't see him. They were starting to get obstructed by the mountain. But we waited at the balcony for 45 minutes or so, and we had a really strong talk about, because you could see into Tibet, and there's a monastery, the Kopan Monastery, or not Kopan Monastery, there's a monastery in the distance that you see, and it's the highest monastery in the world, and it's just a little speck in the distance if you really can see it. And we talked about Buddhism and all this kind of stuff, and we were waiting to get word from our team to see if they're coming down, because they're in a real precarious situation up there. And we left 1 bottle of tea that Tashi had. We tied it to a rope and left it there at the balcony in case they needed it. And then we rappelled back down to Camp 4. So that's kind of how it panned out for us. Yeah.
Wow. And everybody got down okay from the team?
Everyone got down okay. 1 person turned out never even left the tent from Camp 4. I didn't know that at the time, because, I was leading out with Ryan by myself in the darkness. Him and I were going by ourselves, for hour after hour. And I didn't know that one of our teammates never even left Camp 4. He just couldn't go any further. And then the 2 other people, they had really dicey situations. Matter of fact, one guy, he sat down at the South Summit, and he was just going to die. He's done. He couldn't do any more. And then finally, Ryan did something absolutely brilliant. He was going to have a grandchild, his first grandchild, in a couple of weeks. And Ryan got into his ear, and he yelled in his ear, and he goes, "What do you want me to tell your daughter of why you were never able to meet her first child?" And for some reason, that perked him up enough to the point where he could get back up out of the snow, and he shuffled his way back down to Camp 4. The other teammates started to fall asleep because, again, the hypoxia was so strong, it makes you tired, right? And she was rappelling down the triangular face towards Camp 4, and she started falling asleep on the rope. Luckily, she dozed off one time and then grabbed the rope. Otherwise, she would have fallen down. And ironically, that person that I saw in the snow dead, that's how he died. He fell in that location, and he slid to his death, and that's where his body ended up the year prior. He died the year prior. I come to find out he was an Indian guy, Indian gentleman from India that died the year before, and that's how he died. He fell on the rope, slid down 250 feet or so down to that spot, and that's how he died. And Goldner was close to maybe be in that same situation. So it was definitely a dynamic experience. But again, I wasn't privy to none of that stuff till later, So.
Razor's edge, man. Wow. Obviously, share where people can find everything. And then if you have any, I don't know, words of wisdom or anything you want to kind of some parting words, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, the obvious thing is, if people want to watch the Quest Everest, it's a 97-minute documentary, 2D documentary, or they want to watch the Quest Everest VR, which is the only first-person virtual reality ascent of Mount Everest. You're actually climbing with me to the summit and back. Both of those productions, the Quest Everest and the Quest Everest VR, you can find out links, more info, photos, and all that stuff at thequesteverest.com. That's the easiest way to direct them, because then they can link out through to how they want to, take in the experiences where they want to watch it underneath their preferred platforms. So yeah, thequesteverest.com. is the best place to find that. And with regards to maybe going back to conquering your own personal Everest, I can't reiterate enough that when that light bulb moment comes, when you're sitting on the couch mindlessly watching Days of the Lives or whatever it was at that time, and that light bulb moment comes and says, you know what, I want to do this, whatever that this is. And this becomes a daunting challenge that you have no idea how you're going to get there. You have no idea how to start. And therefore, like I said, it's your personal Everest that you have to figure out and try to conquer. And you may never conquer it because you never really conquer Everest. Everest just allows you that opportunity to get to the top and to be a part of that. Well, you never really conquer your dream. You just fulfill that dream and you live out that dream. You make that like a sniper. You sniper in really, really tight. You zoom in really tight on that objective, and everything else that you do during your day, that's something that, that's not part of that dream. You try to use that in a positive way to help focus even tighter and tighter and tighter until you figured out, okay, this is how my dream is going to become a reality. Now I'm going to go for it and I'm going to put it into action. And that's something that I think maybe people will get when they watch the movie itself.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. And now past 2 a.m. at your time, I don't know if this compares to the hypoxia on Everest in terms of fatigue and dizziness. These travel podcasts can be exhausting. I know these podcast hosts, they ask a lot of questions. And
yeah, Jason.
If you can survive this, you can survive your next adventure, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No worries.
No, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for taking the time to share. And yeah, let me know when the next one comes out so we can have you back on to talk about that and share it with everybody. Would love to do that. Maybe 100%. We can align time zones a little better next time.
Either way, it'd be my honor. I have no problem doing this. Again, it's about the experience and be able to share these educational thrill rides with the people. So, and of course, talking to you is awesome. I could talk to you till 5 a.m. You're very
all right.
Easy.
Well, let's keep going. We got a bonus round. No, I'm kidding.
You're a very easy person to talk to. You're cool as can be. So yeah, man, I appreciate it, and I'm honored that I had a chance to sit down and talk to you, and just enjoy the rest of your day too. That's all I can ask for from here on.
All right, man. Get some sleep.
I appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, man.
I loved that conversation with Alex. I want to thank him. A few thoughts on that in a moment. First, part 4 of our top 5 road trips in the USA series. Enjoy. I'm excited to formally welcome you to another edition of our special mini-series, the 5 best road trips in the USA. We've gone on 3 amazing adventures so far together, an epic East Coast mix, an incredible Southern swing, and an all-too-overlooked hidden gem in the North. Today, you are headed to the middle, the actual geographic center of the USA. But wait, did you know that there are 3 official geographic centers for the United States? I'll share what that's all about in a moment, along with which one you'll be visiting today. I do want to thank our friends at Defender for supporting this series, this 5 best road trips in the USA, where each week you discover a new unforgettable trip in a region of the US. Of course, a breakdown of why the trip is worth doing, a suggested itinerary, and a sampling of some of the amazing variety of things you can see and do and eat along the way. First, a question: what makes every trip you take unique and unlike anyone else's, even though you may be visiting the same place? It's your willingness to dive into a destination and explore it your way that creates your on-the-ground experience. It's your willingness to travel, to get out of your comfort zone and embrace all of the uncertainties that come with that. That serves as an excellent reminder to yourself that you are capable of great things and able to embrace the impossible. You are an icon of adventure. And I do want to say a massive thanks to another icon of adventure, Defender, for supporting this special mini-series. Defender is truly the ultimate road trip vehicle for many reasons, including its legendary capability, both off-road and on, its cargo capacity, and the fact that it's tested to the extreme. Defender's family of vehicles includes the 90, 110, or the 130, which has 8 seats with a tough, rigid body design that's been reimagined for a new generation of explorers. That is you. Design your Defender at LandRoverUSA.com. Now, let's talk about this geographic center of the USA. Well, You have 3, because if you're talking about the contiguous 48 states, just the 48 U.S. states, it's near Lebanon, Kansas. If you're including Alaska and Hawaii, it's near Belfourche, or Forche, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, South Dakota. And if it's just the 48 plus Alaska, you're near Castle Rock, South Dakota. So you're still in South Dakota. That's 2 wins for South Dakota. So we're rolling with South Dakota as the winner. But that's not the only reason I want to take you there today. I think South Dakota is one of the most underrated states to visit in the USA. The state population is just over 900,000, but size-wise, it's over 77,000 square miles, which is 16th in size among the 50 states, which means it's just 10 people per square mile. Plenty of room to roam. You'll experience big skies and magnificent nature and stunning geographical features, Native American culture and history, Wild West vibes, some unique wildlife, including bison, elk, and prairie dogs, as well as cool towns like the gateway to the Black Hills, Rapid City, where you can indulge in urban delights with easy access to outdoor adventures. By the way, the state's tourism board tagline over at travelsouthdakota.com is "So much South Dakota, so little time." What a great tagline. And the state has been referred to as the land of infinite variety, and what traveler doesn't love variety? So before we dive into this roughly 300-mile loop with a handle, a back and forth handle, which will take us out to the Badlands and back to Rapid City, I do want to highlight an experience that is not to be missed, something that I would have loved to have done when I was there. When you plan a trip to South Dakota, be sure to look up when and where you can find a local Native American powwow. What is a powwow? Let me read a little bit about what you can expect from the official tourism board website, travelsouthdakota.com. Quote, a powwow, or wachipi, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota for dance, is a traditional indigenous cultural celebration and social event that can last from 1 to several days. Historically, powwows are believed to have originated from the war dance societies of the Ponca and other Southern Plains tribes. Today, powwows serve as a way for Native people representing all tribal backgrounds to share experiences and connect. And they go on to say you can expect, quote, beating drums, soulful singing, dances that mesmerize and intrigue. These beautiful elements of a powwow combine to create a sense of celebration and community that must be seen in person to be truly experienced, end quote. Of course, you can also try Native American food staples like Indian tacos, fry bread in a tasty fruit sauce/jam called wozapi. That's spelled Wojapi. And attending a powwow, to me, it sounds like such a unique experience that you really can't get anywhere else or in many places, and unique to the States. So slot that into your itinerary. Okay. Now, I suggest kicking it off in Rapid City, South Dakota, and using that as a base. Of course, there's loads to do, including uncommon attractions like checking out the Dahl Brothers chainsaw art, for example. It's a city of 80,000, so you're going to find your way around, no problem. And it provides a great service as a jumping off point to a day of exploration I'm calling Monumental Monuments Day. Now, you can, of course, hit the road and keep going after this, but if you want to use Rapid City as a base and do like a back and forth thing, these are all within striking distance. First, Mount Rushmore. A few fun facts about Mount Rushmore. You've seen the pictures. Perhaps you're listening and you've been there. Then you know, as I do, having stood there and staring at it, it's one of those places where, you know, you've seen the photos a million times and you know what it is, but it's still almost shocking to see it in person. It's just like, wow, they really carved that on the side of a mountain. Like, this is, I can't believe I'm looking at this right now. Like, kind of one of those moments. And even though it's a must do, and it's one of those things like almost everybody that visits is going to hit up, it's still one of those spectacular moments. For me, it was like that, which is like, wow, this is like, there it is. There's Mount Rushmore right there. Few fun facts. Over 90% of the carving was done using dynamite. The original plan included the president's full torsos. That would have been difficult. And there is a hidden room. I just found out about this. There's a secret chamber called the Hall of Records behind Abraham Lincoln's head. So check it out. I mean, you got to go and see Mount Rushmore. It's a must-do. Okay. After that, you can make your way to a memorial that I can just say standing there, I remember the feeling. This is the interesting thing about travel. You don't sometimes remember exactly how the weather was or even who you were with sometimes, or, how you got there, or a lot of these things. For me, those details go missing. But what I do remember distinctly often is a certain feeling I had, an emotion, or just like I don't want to say a vibe, but just a sense. And I just remember standing there and looking at the Crazy Horse Memorial. It's the world's largest mountain carving. It's been under construction since 1948, still at work in progress, which was also really cool to see. I just remember feeling incredibly humbled by this and inspired in a lot of ways. And just, a lot of adjectives that I would say I can't even, like feelings I can't put into adjectives, I would say. And, knowing this is a point in history where, when we go to see like the pyramids of Egypt or something else, it happened and it's historic, and you see it and it's spectacular and it's mysterious and all of those things. And I think that the Crazy Horse Memorial, just my thought, is that this will be one of the new wonders of the world at some point. And so in our lifetime, it may not even be finished, but you can go and experience what I think is a potential future world wonder in real time being built. It's just lovely. And as stated on their official website for the nonprofit, crazyhorsememorial.com, quote, Crazy Horse Memorial honors all indigenous people of North America, stands as a reminder of the importance of reconciliation, respecting differences, embracing diversity, striving for unity, and appreciating life's deeper meaning as it has always been represented in Native American cultural values. This will never change, end quote. I mean, who can't get behind that? Just an incredible sight. If you're just curious after this, go Google Crazy Horse Memorial if you haven't seen it and see what they're building there. Okay, moving on, I want to highlight a worthwhile side trip. From here, you can take to Custer State Park. Seek out wildlife. You can drive the 18-mile wildlife loop. Some of the animals you might spot include bighorn sheep, pronghorn deer, elk, coyote, prairie dogs, wild turkey, burros, and a herd of nearly 1,300 bison. And if you haven't seen one of those in reality, in real life, that is quite jarring. It's just like, wow. It's like seeing a celebrity or something. There's a lot of history and really sad stories around how the bison were gone from millions in terms of population to what it is today. And just seeing them in their natural habitat is quite spectacular and quite memorable. Okay, next we're headed to Deadwood and the Black Hills National Forest area. Deadwood is a former 1870s gold rush town turned national historic landmark. You can take in a rodeo. You can catch a historical reenactment of a Wild West shootout. And you can even tour a brothel where, as said on Deadwood.com, they, quote, use storytelling to interpret the history of prostitution in Deadwood and the Wild West. So plenty to see and do there. Next, it's on to the Black Hills. The name Black Hills comes from the Lakota words Pahasapa, which means hills that are black. And again, going back to, this is a theme here, my time in South Dakota, can't tell you exactly where I was in the Black Hills. Can't tell you what hike I did or anything like that. But I can tell you I hiked up to a peak and I was staring out at the Black Hills in the forest. And I just remember that feeling. Like, what a spectacular view. Stunning scenery. If you enjoy walking, if you enjoy hiking, spend some time hiking the 75-mile network of Black Hills trails. And you can't go wrong. Side note, the Black Hills also offers over 3,800 miles of motorized travel on the forest as well. So if you can test out that Defender's legendary off-road capability and durability with some off-roading there. Okay, you can spend more time in a bit of comfort in this area if you want to base out of Spearfish, South Dakota. Could be a good base for you. Okay, next stop, the Badlands. And on the way, if you love a good old-fashioned, kitschy, American roadside tourist attraction like I do, you'll enjoy a stop at Wall Drug. Their signs are ubiquitous, so you won't miss it. That's all I'm going to say about it. Afterwards, you're going to be entering the Badlands, a breathtaking, otherworldly, literally, like it feels like you're on another planet when you're standing among these iconic geographic formations. It's like you've been dropped onto Mars or something. The Badlands formed roughly 70 million years ago when ancient seas deposited layers of sediment followed by erosion from wind and water, creating the incredible formations you see today. The landscape, it's stunning, got sharp spires and deep canyons, colorful striped rock layers that reveal millions of years of geological history, creating what the Lakota called Mako Sika, or land bad. Badlands National Park is a relatively remote park, and consequently, there's minimal light pollution, so stick around for stargazing. If you want to let the night skies fill you with wonder, you might even catch a glimpse of the International Space Station, which orbits the Earth every 90 minutes and can be seen regularly in the night sky. I love putting these together for you because I learn these things. Now tonight I'm going to go outside and look up and try to find the International Space Station. See when that's coming by. See if you can catch it there. Now, you've got that special road trip glow, don't you? I mean, we've done all these incredible things on this audio adventure. You're probably reflecting on all of the awesome adventures you had on your way back to close out the journey, headed back to Rapid City. Unless the adorable prairie dogs at Robert's Prairie Dog Town convince you to stay. This is the largest prairie dog town in the accessible areas of Badlands National Park, and they are so cute. Although they can also carry the literal plague, so be sure to keep your distance. Woo! What a trip. Whether you're watching a powwows, hypnotic dances, standing beneath monuments carved out of mountains, literal mountains, or letting the Badlands' otherworldly silence sink in, you're visiting a place where bison still roam and the night sky puts on a show that no city can match. South Dakota can make you feel simultaneously small and a part of something vast. Now, you know what they mean when they say so much South Dakota, so little time. Next week, you'll get part 5, the final installment of the 5 best road trips in the USA. This last one's so near and dear to my heart for many reasons you'll discover next week. For now, I want to thank our friends at Defender, who love a great road trip. They are supporting this special 5 best road trips in the USA miniseries geared to helping you discover your next great adventure. Check out the ultimate road trip vehicle, the Defender. Defender's family of vehicles includes the 90, 110, or 130. This icon of adventure with a tough, rigid body design has been reimagined for a new generation of explorers. That is you. You can design your Defender at LandRoverUSA.com. Thanks for listening. There you have it. I'm calling that one an epic episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. Now, I want to leave you with a quote in a moment. I think this one sums up an episode almost better than any other quote I've ever shared. First, just a couple quick thoughts on the conversation. I think that idea of climbing your own personal Everest, taking your own big goals and dreams seriously, I just want to reiterate that as we come out of this. That's something that I strive to do. And stories like Alex's, hearing his journey from, childhood dream to what he's done today, that's not something everybody's going to do, but it certainly gives me motivation. It reminds me that the human spirit's capable of so much if we just let ourselves embrace that mindset, which isn't easy every day. Believe me, I know. A lot of self-doubt and things that I'm doing and putting out there and working on and all that, like we all do. But stories like this remind me that, hey, we get this one life, and let's take our dreams seriously. Let's do that. So I just wanted to leave you with that for what it's worth. Now, I'm going to wrap this one up with a quote from Sir Edmund Hillary, of course, the first person to climb Mount Everest with Tenzing Norgay. And this one sums it up so nicely. He said, "People do not decide to become extraordinary. They decide to accomplish extraordinary things." Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.